Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week we're going to be talking about bench grinders, and we'd like to thank Hunter for suggesting this topic. And book 17 is coming out soon. We'll drop a podcast on the topics and the release date, and we would really appreciate your support by downloading a copy. In the 1800s, bench grinders had a hand crank to spin an abrasive disc.
Wow.
One of the first electric bench grinders was marketed in 1918 by the Cincinnati Electric Tool Company. So they've been around for a while.
Yeah. What is a bench grinder?
It's a stationary power tool that usually has two grinding wheels, one on each side of the electric motor, and it's designed to be mounted to a workbench to reduce the chance of injuries. So you can bolt the unit to a workbench permanently or mount the unit to a board or a small stand so you can clamp it to a workbench when you need it.
What is it used for?
It's great for sharpening lawnmower blades, chisels, knives, scissors, axes, and other tools. You can shape metal, remove rust and paint, polish, and buff surfaces. It's primarily designed for metal, but there are specialty wheels for wood.
Have you ever used a bench grinder? We had one at the hardware stores, right?
Yeah, we used a grinder a lot at the hardware stores for sharpening tools.
Not we, I never did.
Great for sharpening lawnmower blades, cutting down key blanks to the correct size. And I've used a bench grinder to shorten bolts down to the size I needed for a project. And if you're doing a project like that where you're grinding down bolts, you would hold the head with locking pliers and screw two nuts onto the bolt. You'd want that bottom nut at the length you want it. And then once you cut the bolt down, you'd unscrew that bottom nut, and that will clean and straighten the threads as you unscrew it.
Nifty.
And then you would test the threads with that bottom nut to make sure you can screw the nut back on before you remove the other nut. And if it doesn't screw on easily, you can use a small file to clean up the threads or grind the bolt down slightly.
Okay. What are the different types of bench grinders?
6, 8, and 10-inch bench grinders are the most common. There are also 3-inch mini bench grinders. And that size or number relates to the diameter of the grinder wheel that it takes. 6-inch or 8-inch is a good size for most projects around the house.
Do you need to know the arbor size?
Yeah, and the most common arbor size I saw was either 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch.
Okay. Explain what the arbor is, please.
It's the spindle or the shaft that you're mounting your grinding wheel or your wire wheel to. You need to match the hole size on the wheel to the arbor size. And I looked at bench grinder wheels at the home centers by me, and they had wheels with 1-inch holes, and there were inserts included to fit 3/4, 5/8, or 1/2-inch arbors, which makes it convenient. A couple of the wire wheels I looked at only fit 5/8 or 1/2-inch arbors, so check the package or the specs if you're shopping online. And the grinder wheels I looked at were either 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch thick.
All right. How do you replace a wheel?
When you're replacing a wheel, you're going to have to remove the wheel guard first, and then you're going to need 2 wrenches to remove the hex nut holding the wheel to the arbor. On the models I saw and the models I've used, as you're facing the grinder, the left side hex nut is removed by turning it clockwise. The right side is removed by turning it counterclockwise.
Tricky.
So you're holding onto the nuts on each side with a wrench, but check your manual. You can also use a wood shim between the wheel and the tool rest to help wedge the wheel in place while you're loosening the nut, or you can hold onto the wheel with a leather glove. And when you're replacing the grinding wheel, there's going to be an inner washer, also called a flange, and an outer washer. Check your manual to make sure you have the correct side facing the wheel. Most are going to be concave, but it can also be flat. And check it when you remove it the first time.
Or you could take a picture of it before you remove it.
Right. Yeah, great idea.
Is there any difference for a wire wheel?
What's interesting about replacing a grinding wheel with a wire wheel, when you remove that inner washer, you're going to be adding a spacer. Then you're going to replace the inner washer, then add the wire wheel, then the outer washer, and then the nut. So yeah, it's a little different. And you're just going to snug up that nut. You don't want to over tighten it. You could damage the wheel. And also don't over tighten the nut on a grinding wheel. Just snug it up. There's also going to be a label, usually made out of cardboard, on the wheel. Don't remove it. It's called a blotter, B-L-O-T-T-E-R, and this cushions the washers and it helps prevent the wheel from cracking. The blotter should always be slightly larger in diameter to the washers. And when you're doing projects like this, or when you're replacing a wheel, make sure that the grinder is always unplugged.
All right. What are the different types of wheels?
Grinder wheels come in coarse, medium, and fine grits, which is the way some are labeled, although some have the grit listed, like 36 grit for coarse, 60 grit for medium, and 120 grit for fine. On the bench grinder, you'll usually have coarse or medium on one side to shape material, like if you're sharpening a knife or a lawnmower blade, and fine on the other side to hone or smooth the surface.
How long do the wheels last?
One manufacturer said change the wheel when the gap between the wheel and the tool rest can't be closed to 1/8 of an inch or less, or the wheel shows excessive wear, chips, or cracks. But check the manual for your model. The wheels we had on the bench grinders at the stores lasted for years.
You said tool rest. You want to cover the parts on a bench grinder?
Most bench grinders have a heavy base with mounting holes. They have a wheel on each side of the motor, and a wheel guard is covering about 3/4 of the wheel. On the bottom of the opening on the wheel guard, there'll be an adjustable tool rest. This is where you brace the material or tool that you're working on. On the top of the opening of the wheel guard, there'll be a spark arrestor to deflect sparks and debris down.
Good.
Above the spark arrestor, there'll be a clear adjustable eye shield.
Okay. How do you use a bench grinder?
Before each use, check that the bolts and fasteners are tight, the wheel isn't chipped or damaged, and it's properly mounted. There's no wobble. With the grinder unplugged, do a ring test to identify any problems with the grinding wheel.
How?
You would tap the side of the wheel with the plastic handle of a screwdriver, and you should hear a high-pitched ring, almost bell-like. Spin the wheel a little bit and tap it again, and do that all around the wheel. If there's a crack or damage to the wheel, you're going to hear a dull thud. And if you do hear a dull thud, you should replace the wheel. A damaged wheel can break apart and potentially cause serious injuries. You should also do a ring test before attaching a new grinder wheel.
How would you do that?
You'd hold the wheel with a screwdriver through the hole and then tap it with another screwdriver using the handle.
Okay. Back to using a bench grinder.
So make sure the grinder is tightly bolted or clamped to your work surface. Remove any flammable materials around your workspace. Adjust the tool rest so it's within 1/8 of an inch of the wheel. Too much space can cause whatever you're grinding to get caught or pulled into the wheel, which can cause an injury. Adjust the spark arrestor to within 1/4 inch of the wheel. Put on goggles or a face shield and adjust the eye shield. Plug the grinder in and then turn it on and let the wheel come up to full speed, or adjust your speed and let it run for a full minute to confirm the wheel isn't going to break apart and there's no wobble.
Okay.
OSHA says grinding wheels are most likely to shatter the first minute of operation if they're damaged.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting, huh?
So don't stand in front of the wheel when you first start it up?
Right, exactly. You want to hold your work firmly on the tool rest and move it slowly into the wheel. Use light pressure and keep the workpiece constantly moving in a steady pace so you're controlling the amount of material that's being removed, and it helps keep it from overheating. For small objects like a bolt, use locking pliers to hold the bolt or the pliers on the tool rest for support. Only grind on the front face of the wheel. Don't use the side of the wheel. And stand off to the side while you're grinding to avoid sparks and debris. It can also give you a better view of what you're grinding, and if the wheel does break apart, it's going to reduce the chance of injury.
All right.
Keep checking your workpiece frequently to check your progress and to keep it cooler. For small pieces, you can use a container filled with water to dunk the metal into to cool it down if it gets too hot. When you're finished with your project, turn off and unplug the grinder for safety. When the grinder wheel is cool, clean up all the debris from around the grinder.
All right. What are some features to look for in a bench grinder?
Bench grinders should come with a tool rest and an eye shield, and they should be adjustable. Some models will list the horsepower, which can vary from around a quarter horsepower to 1 horsepower. A higher horsepower motor can be more powerful if you're doing projects where you're removing a lot of material from thick metal, but for most tool sharpening and projects around the house, a low horsepower model is going to do a great job.
Okay.
The grinders I looked at were in the 2 to 8 amp range, but I did see one that said it was 15 amps in the specifications.
Ooh.
So if you're using a grinder in an older home with 15 amp circuits, you might want to stay in that 8 amp range or less to reduce the chance of tripping the breaker.
Right.
Some models have variable speed to give it more control. They can have a range of around 2,000 RPMs to 3,600 RPMs. Standard one-speed grinders have an RPM of around 3,000 to 3,600.
Okay.
There are slow-speed bench grinders around 2,000 RPMs or less to give you more control for tool sharpening, and it reduces the heat generated. So check the specifications.
Right.
Slow start motors help extend the life of the motor. Anti-vibration models have rubberized feet on the bottom of the unit to reduce vibration, and the units usually are heavier to keep them in place. And compare the weight if you're going to be moving the grinder and clamping it onto a bench. Some heavy-duty 8-inch grinders I looked at were around 60 pounds.
Wow.
Where a 6-inch bench grinder can be around 15 pounds.
Wow, big difference.
Yeah. Some grinders come with a water tray to dip your tools into. Some specialty grinders have a water tray under the wheel for projects like sharpening chisels or knives, and that keeps the metal cooler so it holds an edge longer. A built-in work light is a nice feature if you have your grinder in an area that doesn't have good lighting. And I didn't see the power cord length listed on the specifications on the grinders I looked at. So if you need to use an extension cord, use the shortest length cord you need. The cord should be grounded and match or exceed the amp rating of your grinder. An underrated cord can damage the motor over time and then overheat the cord.
Right. What are some safety tips for using a bench grinder?
Don't use a grinder around flammable material. The sparks can ignite flammable vapors. Don't wear loose clothing or jewelry. Keep long hair tied back. A few manuals I read recommended not wearing gloves because they can get caught on the wheel.
Wow.
Wear non-slip covered footwear. Wear safety goggles or a face shield, hearing protection, and an N95 mask. Always unplug the tool when you're finished with a project. Don't overreach when you're working. The grinding wheel RPM rating should match or exceed the RPM rating of the grinder. Don't touch the wheel after you've used it because it's going to be very hot. A couple manuals said, do not use this grinder for softer material like brass, aluminum, copper, plastic, magnesium, or wood. So check your manual. Only use the wheel size rated for your grinder. Never start the grinder with your work against the wheel. And frequently clean dust away from, under, and around the grinder.
Okay. What are some maintenance tips?
You should use compressed air regularly to clean dust and debris out from the motor housing. Dust and grit can create a shock hazard.
Wow.
Which is wild, yeah. Wipe down the grinder with a soft brush or a soft, damp cloth. Never use flammable cleaners. All the manuals I read said the grinder doesn't need lubrication, but you should check the manual for your model, and then routinely dress the grinding wheel.
What does that mean?
So a wheel dresser is a tool that removes debris caught in the grit. It sharpens the grit and it smooths the surface. And there are 3 common types: a star dresser, a diamond dresser, and a dressing stick. A star dresser has a handle with a row of wavy cutters at the end. Diamond dressers have a handle with a rectangular end with diamond particles bonded to the surface. And a dressing stick is a rectangular block made out of a very hard material like silicon carbide.
All right. What are some top-rated bench grinder companies?
DeWalt, Ryobi, RYOBI, Wen, WEN, Craftsman, and Skill, SKIL. Some top-rated goggle companies are Klein Tools, DeWalt, and 3M.
If you wear prescription glasses, look for a model design to fit over your glasses.
Yeah, smart. Some reusable earplug companies are 3M, HDX, just the letters H, D, and X, and Milwaukee.
Cool. Do you have anything else to add?
I think that's a good overview of bench grinders. It's a handy tool for sharpening and small grinding projects around the house.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our ebooks, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, books 1 through 16 on Amazon, and soon, book 17.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow Cindy on Twitter at FixItCohost, and you can follow us on Instagram, Fixit Home Improvement.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.